The endocrine system is a series of glands located throughout the body that release their products into the extracellular space and blood. These are distinct from other glands that we've seen before, like the submandibular and sublingual glands, which are exocrine glands, meaning that they release their products into a duct, and those ducts are going to secrete the product into a specific place, whereas endocrine glands have a much more diffuse function. There are endocrine glands lots of different places, but we're going to start up here in the brain and examine the endocrine functions of it. We can now see that we have a sagittal cut of the brain here, and we can see right here this bump is called the thalamus, and the area inferior to it here is going to be called the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is located just here, and it's going to be an important part of the brain that releases neurotransmitters and hormones that are going to influence water balance, blood pressure, temperature, and it also has significant effects on a nearby downstream structure called the pituitary gland, to which it's connected to by blood vessels. The pituitary gland is hanging out just here, inferior to the optic chiasm, and it's going to release many hormones that control a lot of different bodily processes. It's sometimes known as the master gland of the body, and it's going to be influencing many of the other endocrine organs. There's a comprehensive list, is not going to be necessary right now, but just know that growth hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, various reproductive hormones, antidiuretic hormone, and others are all released from the pituitary gland right here. Before we finish in the brain, I want to draw your attention to this little bleb right here, just above the thalamus. This is called the epithalamus, or more commonly, the pineal gland. And the pineal gland releases melatonin, which is a hormone that's going to allow our body to get ready for the process of falling asleep. The next gland we're going to investigate is the thyroid gland, which is located in the anterior neck. So we'll zoom in here, and we can see that we have the thyroid cartilage of the larynx here, the cricoid cartilage of the larynx, and here, inferior to both of them, is the thyroid gland, although its hemispheres out here on the lateral side do come up fairly high towards those cartilages. So the thyroid gland is located here, two lateral large areas here connected by an isthmus, this bridge running between them, and the thyroid gland is posterior to these long strap muscles, or infrahyoid muscles, that are running from the sternum up to the cartilages and then to the hyoid bone just there. Now the thyroid gland is a creator of thyroid hormone, no surprise there, which is a major regulator of our metabolic activity. It also releases calcitonin, which is going to decrease the amount of circulating calcium in our blood. So if we have too much calcium, the calcitonin releasing cells in the thyroid gland will release calcitonin to remedy that. Now, calcium is also controlled by parathyroid glands, which are on the posterior side of the thyroid gland itself. So let's pull back out a little bit. And if we turn, we can't quite see it from this posterior side. So let's see if I can get a grip on it. Oh, and there we go. So here's the posterior side of that thyroid gland here, and we can see those little brown dots. There's a superior and inferior parathyroid gland located on each side, so on the right and left, and the parathyroid glands are going to release, surprise, parathyroid hormone. And its main job is to increase the calcium levels in the blood by breaking it down from bone, or by absorbing more calcium from the gut. Parathyroid hormone will have the opposite effect that calcitonin did, released from the nearby thyroid gland. Posterior to the stomach, we can see the location of the pancreas. Its head is nestled here in the loop of the duodenum. We've got its neck, its body, and its tail stretching out towards the spleen. And we've discussed it already in reference to its exocrine function, how it releases digestive proenzymes into the duodenum at the major duodenal papilla to help us digest food. But the pancreas also has endocrine functions due to various clusters of cells scattered throughout the gland called pancreatic islands, commonly called islets of Langerhans. So these islets contain cells that are going to release multiple endocrine hormones, and chief among those are going to be insulin, which is going to decrease circulating blood glucose, and glucagon, which is going to increase circulating blood glucose. So just as we had the thyroid gland as the locus for control of calcium, the endocrine pancreas is our locus of control for circulating blood sugar levels by way of. Now, moving a little bit posterior into the retroperitoneum, or the area behind the peritoneal cavity, we're going to get the pancreas and spleen out of the way, and now we can see two other endocrine organs here on the right and left. These are the adrenal glands, sometimes called suprarenal glands, but these adrenal glands are sitting just on top of the kidneys, and they are endocrine organs, and they're kind of interesting. They're really two endocrine glands in one. The outer cortex, the visible part, releases a series of hormones that deal with salt, sugar, and sexual activity. So they're going to deal with mineral corticoids, glucocorticoids, and gonadocorticoids. And in particular, I should mention that cortisol, which is going to be a hormone that changes our metabolism in response to stress, is released by the adrenal cortex, the area on the outside. Deep inside the cortex is another cluster of cells that actually has a separate embryologic origin and migrated into the cortex, and that is called the adrenal medulla. And the adrenal medulla releases adrenaline, or as it's known now, epinephrine, as well as some norepinephrine. So the adrenaline in the adrenal glands, this epinephrine is released, moves into our bloodstream, and is going to get us ready for a life and death situation. It's going to increase our sympathetic activity, which is going to be our fight or flight response. And a massive part of that is the release of epinephrine and some norepinephrine from the adrenal medulla into the bloodstream. Now, right nearby, we have the kidney. Now, most organs have some endocrine activity, and I'm not really drawing too much attention to that, but we're just going to name the kidney. We'll name drop it here real quick. Even though it is not technically what we consider an endocrine organ, it absolutely has some endocrine activity. In particular, it can release a hormone called renin, based on the survey of the urine that's being produced in each nephron. The kidney can release renin to alter the water balance and the amount of water that's recovered from the collecting ducts within. Now, the pathway by which that happens is fairly complicated, but it's worth noting that many organs have a means by which they can act in an endocrine way to regulate their own activity or the activity of nearby cells. Particularly notable in the gut tube, where we have what are called enteroendocrine cells. Now, these cells are not a specific endocrine organ. They're located in the wall of the stomach, the duodenum, the small intestine, the large intestine. So those enteroendocrine cells are individual groups of cells scattered throughout the entire area. And each of those cells releases a specific hormone that's going to affect its neighboring cells as well as nearby tissues. And even though these are individual scattered cells, if we were to pile them all up in one spot, they would actually constitute the largest endocrine organ in the body. Now, to finish up, we're going to look at the gonads, the reproductive organs, the ovaries and the testes, which have functions that are distinct from endocrine cells, but they are in fact also endocrine organs. So we'll just kind of zoom in a little bit here, pan down, and here we can see that we have the uterus, the oviduct, sometimes called the fallopian tube, connecting it to the ovary on its posterior side right here. So the ovary, just there, is going to be an important structure in releasing oocytes, but also controls a lot of the timing resulting in the menstrual cycle. And it also releases estrogens that not only affect the menstrual cycle, but have feminizing effects throughout the body, particularly when they're released at the time of puberty. So that's the female gonad system. There's also the male gonads, and let's take a look at those right now. Alright, we can now see the male external genitalia. Here we have the penis and the testes in the scrotum. Now remember, in females we have the ovary hanging out on the inside of the pelvic cavity, but in males that testes moves down through the spermatic cord, generates the spermatic cord as it comes down into the scrotum, and in addition to being the place where spermatozoa are created, the testes also create testosterone, which is going to help in the maturation of the spermatozoa, but will also have effects on far-flung tissues once it makes it to the bloodstream. And particularly at puberty, the rising level of testosterone can have masculinizing effects on someone whose tissues are exposed to it. Is located here, so the hypothalamus is under the thalamus. So didn't mean that to happen. Half. Dun dun dun.